FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
I'm getting rich off this climate scam, and you are listening to the Marc Cox Show.
All right, Al Gore, thank you very much. Welcome back into the program. We are continuing to monitor these developments out of Cincinnati, where they're all getting ready for the Donald Trump rally. And they had campaign Carl Cameron from Fox News up on the screen earlier. And some guy walked up behind him in his live shot and did the dab. This is getting out of hand. Can I just say, this whole dab thing, I don't get it, but it's getting out of hand.
I honestly didn't even know what it was until,
really?
I think you told me what it was.
My 8-year-old's been doing it for a long time now, so I know what the dab is.
I was going to say,
she taught me how to do it.
My 10-year-old talks about it, but then I'm like, well, what is it? And he's like, well, I can't tell you.
I can't talk to you about that, Mom. Thanks. That's top secret. So it's getting out of hand. Anyway, glad you're back with us. Report issued yesterday from a panel of Senate Republicans that looked into Planned Parenthood here in the greater St. Louis Planned Parenthood. I've asked Senator Eric Schmitt to join us to talk a little more about that. Senator, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, before we get started on that, the other truth from Al Gore that's irrefutable is that he invented the internet.
Yeah, I should have had him add that in there. That's good.
There's going to be 4. That's right.
There would be 4, that's for sure. You doing well?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I appreciate that. I got to see a little bit of the coverage yesterday from KMIZ down there on the Planned Parenthood report. It sounded to me like the primary complaint from Senator Schaefer was that it was really difficult for the committee to get this information.
Yeah, so just to kind of take a step back, about a year ago, I suppose, when these videos surfaced, which were very disturbing. I don't think, no matter what side of the issue you're on, I mean, the idea of Planned Parenthood executives talking about the selling of body parts in between bites of salad was very disturbing. And so in those videos, St. Louis was actually referenced as an untapped market. And, when that stuff started to come out, our Senate president thought it was appropriate to appoint a committee to investigate whether or not any of that illegal activity was happening in our state. And so I was appointed to that panel. It's called the Sanctity of Life panel. We started hearings last fall where we had people come in and testify, including the director of health, and we asked for Planned Parenthood representatives to come in and testify, and they refused. We asked for documents, and they refused. We issued subpoenas. They refused to turn over documents that would be relevant to us discovering whether or not this was happening. And we almost went as so far as in April and May of calling them in front of the full Senate, which had not happened ever since, I think, 1896 or something, that someone would actually be called in front of the full Senate for a committee hearing to really just get at the truth and not having any preconceived notions, but really be a fact-finding group to try to find out whether or not this was happening in our state. And
right.
So at the end of session, Planned Parenthood agreed to turn over documents that were relevant. We had an opportunity to review those over the last month and a half or so. So yesterday, we had a press conference issuing, kind of our findings. And I suppose, Mark, there are 3 things that became very clear in what was produced. One was the record of the sale of human fetal tissue there's still alarming gaps. For example, there's the contracts for the disposal of human remains are missing or incomplete. They turned over a term sheet that essentially was a price sheet for what they give the pathologist. So after an abortion, the fetal remains go to a pathologist, and then for their final disposal, the contract that they gave us with that pathologist was incomplete. It was a 2-pager that referenced the confidentiality agreement that they did not produce, said they couldn't find it. And the pathologist, when we asked him to produce those documents, took the Fifth Amendment, which is a pretty extraordinary step for a pathologist. I mean, that is essentially allowed under our Constitution.
Right.
But to avoid, potential, criminal prosecution. So we don't really know what that agreement really said. We don't really know what the pathologist did. What we do know is that who the pathologist contracted with in Indiana was charged with the illegal disposal of human remains. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions as it relates to that relationship. The second piece, they appear to be out of compliance with the disposal for some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Planned Parenthood doesn't follow regulations on the disposal of human remains. And the other thing that is very disturbing, as we reviewed those documents that were turned over by Planned Parenthood, in these consent forms that are given to women, there is a shocking indifference to the health and possible medical implications of the abortion. And to give you an example, in one of the forms it says, if you're worried and if you believe this is an emergency, this is after they're discharged, call us. And so there really isn't a directive to call 911, to go to the emergency room. It's to kind of keep everything in that facility. And so I think that was particularly alarming. So we found some gaps in their what they produced, and then uncovered some things that I think were particularly disturbing. But at the end of the day, if you look at all that, it is just a lot of questions in many ways that were raised as opposed to being answered.
Yeah, and I guess you've reached the end of your ability to get those answers unless they were to be called before the full Senate, right?
Well, we've gotten, they produced what they said they had, Planned Parenthood. So we have those. But the real gap here now is the pathologist who they contract with, right? That they send the remains to, that theoretically, could be doing something legal or illegal. We just don't know, because that pathologist has refused to turn over documents and has taken the fifth to testify. So that, I would say, on Planned Parenthood's part, the incomplete document production, particularly of the contract, is relevant. Some of the documents we saw, but then with the pathologist, we just don't know. So, our powers from a legislative body in the Senate are more limited than, say, the powers of the Attorney General to investigate. And we've done everything we can to try to get to the bottom of it, but as I said, there's just a lot of unanswered questions.
We're talking to Senator Eric Schmitt, who is running for state treasurer in Missouri, and of course, Kurt Schaefer, who's on that committee with you, is running for Attorney General. Correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, yep. Thought so. Along with Josh Hawley, who are both running for that. Senator, while I've got you on here, the thing that caught my attention about this is Planned Parenthood is now talking about a court challenge to try to overturn the Missouri law that requires a doctor to have privileges at a local hospital. That's very similar to the one in Texas, is my understanding. Not identical, but similar to the one in Texas that was overturned by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, our law is similar, but not identical. And it remains to be seen whether they bring a challenge. And then, of course, we would hope and expect that our Attorney General would defend the will of the people. And really what we're talking about here are very important patient protections, really treating an abortion facility as you would any other ambulatory surgical center.
Right.
That someone could actually be admitted to an emergency room by that physician if something went wrong. I mean, we actually, last year, the Columbia Planned Parenthood, through this investigation, we discovered that even though they were granted a license by the Department of Health to open up again, the doctor that signed off on that did not have admitting privileges with a hospital. And so, for women, who go through this, if something really went wrong, the idea that a doctor couldn't actually admit that woman into a hospital is very disturbing. So really those regulations, those protections are meant for health and safety reasons of the mother. And so that Supreme Court decision is disturbing in the sense that it's saying that those facilities are going to be treated differently than, another kind of facility that would be performing an operation or a surgery. So it remains to be seen how it plays out in Missouri. I would expect Planned Parenthood would probably challenge it, and then it'll be up to the court to decide.
Yeah, disturbing that they're have so little concern for the health of the mother that the physician is not associated with a hospital. I mean, who are they hiring to perform these abortions. That's what it makes me wonder why they're so worried about having privileges at a local hospital. I guess they're just going to call 911 and hope for the best. That should disturb everyone, quite frankly.
Well, but again, I mean, if you look at the consent forms that we saw in this investigation, that's actually not the thing that they're recommending. They want them to call the facility, not 911, even though the facility then, I guess, under this ruling, wouldn't be treated as a surgery, an ambulatory surgery center, which is disturbing. But again, I think one of the biggest challenges with that court decision now is, for decades, I'm pro-life, but for decades, states were given the opportunity to have these sorts of protections, and that is definitely being eroded with this court decision. I think it's a terrible decision for the country.
No doubt about it. Senator Eric Schmitt, best of luck in your race for state treasurer. You don't have opposition in the primary, correct?
I don't. I am the only candidate that's running on the Republican side that does not have a primary. But we're working hard. We're getting around the state, and it's a big state, Mark.
No kidding. Yes,
but it's going great. And Kennett, and one of the things I think that is a nice little anecdote about how great our state is and how big it is. Kennett, Missouri, is closer to the Gulf of Mexico than it is to Tarkio, Missouri. So there's a lot of miles and a lot of great folks, but we're hitting it hard, and it's a big election this fall. There's no doubt.
Good luck with everything, and if we can help, let us know.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Senator, thank you very much. Senator Eric Schmitt calling in there, a candidate for state treasurer here in Missouri, and obviously statewide name recognition is what he's out there working on right now. So 314-969-9797, 866-455-9797. Tony Colombo's in a few minutes with the results of our biggest ever Twitter poll dealing with this Hillary Clinton email mess. We'll have the results and much more. Get to your phone calls right after this. Stick around.